Okay, so I have Klaus, Ben, and Pierre. Just to quickly go over this, each one of you has 20 minutes. If you want to share screen, then you have to end sharing when your time is up so that the next person can take over the screen. That's about it. I guess I'll monitor the questions that come up on the chat panel. And then if you choose to go less than 20 minutes, your questions will have time to be presented.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Shabnam.
Okay, it is 3:15. Good afternoon, everyone, or maybe good evening to those of you who are in Europe. We are starting this afternoon session with Klaus Jaffe. He's going to talk to us about the fourth law of thermodynamics. Klaus, please take it away.
Thank you. Thanks all of you for hearing me. As you see, I changed the title a little bit because I was aware that some of us are aware that the second law only applies to closed systems. So, in order to avoid any confusion, I prefer to change my title. Synergy is a concept which has strong intuitive meaning. I mean, everybody knows a little bit what it means. It has to do with interactions. It has to do with strange things that happen. It's very difficult to find more precise quantitative definitions of it. And that is what I was trying to do in the last years. The first scientific reference to the words synergy comes from Sherrington in neuromuscular research, where he showed that neurons and muscles, when they join together, they produce phenomena which were not expected without doing the experiment. The same Hermann Haken introduced that concept in physics, studying the origin of coordinated interaction between photons producing laser, and then he used the concept of synergy to many other areas, and he's probably one of the principal promoters of the concept synergy in our times. No? And then, of course, we have Buckminster, who used the concept synergy in architecture, and even if he's not a scientist, specifically he's more of an engineer, he was very popular in popularizing the concept synergy. And there is, of course, a great man, Adam Smith. He never used the word synergy, but the concept of the indivisible hands of the market elicited by division of labor, which does create synergy between the organisms, and he describes it very well, even if he doesn't call it synergy. And I have some simulation models which show that the economy without synergy is not possible, that the market and the division of labor only works when there is synergy. So I think Adam Smith was one of he had the insight what synergy was, he just called it differently and described it with other words. As you see, then synergy is still a concept which different people use with different meanings. So I'm trying here to clarify that a little bit. And I want to apply only irreversible thermodynamics, which applies to open systems and to processes, which means we have to define clearly what systems we are referring to. And if we want to study a process, we have to define a window, a time window where this process occurs. Outside those definitions, the definition of what we are describing may vary. So it's very important to have clear concept of what the system is we are handling. And if we define then a system, there are 4 possible outcomes regarding free energy and entropy. In some processes, free energy is dissipated and entropy increases, which I call dissipation, which doesn't mean that the system has fluxes of other kinds of things. It's the balance during a period of time where the end outcome is dissipation. We can have the opposite. We can have aggregation, where free energy and entropy increases. Then we have equilibration, which is the normal trend to equilibrium, which occurs in all closed systems, but in some open systems also. And then there is this strange thing, synergy, where I think I want to define it at least. I define synergy as those processes in open systems where free energy increases and entropy decreases. Dissipation is probably the simplest classical example. It's very much studied. It's energy and entropy disperse. Combustion and burning of wood is a good example, where something like wood with high energy, free energy content and low entropy is transformed into high entropy mix of gases and produce heat, so losing free energy. No? Then we have, of course, aggregation, which is very common in economics. Markets grow in value, enterprises grow in value, winning armies accumulate territory and resources, something which just increases free energy, but in most of the cases it also increases entropy. It creates disorder during the process. And then we have equilibrium, or equilibration, which of course is what occurs in most closed systems. Crystallization is a good example, where from a solution we have occurrence of order, of structure, spontaneously, self-organized. And then of course we have synergy, which is more difficult to explain. Let's take an example of the cannon. If we have firepower, black powder, and put a ball over it, a stone over it, and burn it, we will produce plenty of heat. The stone probably won't move very much, and that's all. If we make exactly the same thing, but introduce those components into a cannon, first the powder and then the cannon ball, we will produce a huge amount of work. The cannon will fly through the air with much energy produced by the burning powder, by the exploding powder. So just by changing the border conditions, we can change from producing dissipation, simple dissipation, to producing a synergistic situation. And that is the interesting thing about synergy. So we can define synergy or synergization as a process where entropy production is reduced or delayed in time, and free energy or work is increased due to information-rich constrained border parameters, which have embedded information. So going back to the classification of the four processes, we then have a more clear idea, but we have to take care of how to define the system. For example, if we look at a losing army after the war, they probably is a system where huge amounts of dissipation, whereas the winning army may end the war with aggregation, with more riches. The same happens to brokers. Some brokers actually dissipate plenty of their wealth, other aggregated. So it's not, the processes might vary depending on the situations. And in synergy, I mean, we have some clear examples, at least some of them, where everybody coincides about calling them like that. It's living organisms and many situations in economics. So up to now, what is clear now, that self-organization is a very bad definition. For example, the former talk was very nice, very good, but I don't like the term. I think he spoke more of synergy, because self-organization can be equilibration. A crystal, when it grows, it's self-organized. Nobody organizes it. So self-equilibration doesn't help to define synergy. And we need a concept better than entropy, which is complexity. And I just define complexity as the density of entropy. Complexity is low density of entropy. And that helps very much because it allows you to quantify differences in entropy in growing systems and other kind of situations. So the main difference between self-organized equilibrium systems and synergistic systems is the kind of complexity it's created. A crystal has redundant complexity. It's the same structure pattern, which is just growing the same. Whereas in synergistic systems, the complexity we get is diverse, it's non-repetitive, it's non-redundant. So that's a very important clarification. That comes from the definition of life from Heisinger, who spoke about symmetric crystals, which should be organizing life, no? Which is the same concept. It's non-redundant complexity. So with that knowledge, we went to literature and produced some data in different situations to actually check numerically if these concepts can be useful. So in antithermite societies, we can measure social complexity, we can measure energy consumption, we can measure the output, the free energy the system has in order to produce work. And it clearly defines us as a synergistic system. We see that in human cities, we can organize that also. I have the reference to these examples in the extended abstract. You can check that out, they're all published. In humans, we can correlate scientific development with economic development, which means the richer the information, which means the lower the entropy in information, the higher the economic development. We have simulation of labor and economic efficiency. We have brain complexity and polymorphism, colony size and ants, where we can also measure the amount of entropy comparing different groups of ants and the colony size or the degree of polymorphism. We can even test it with computer searches of text entropy. We can compare a text, for example, produced by Trump with one produced by Maturana, or we can compare Nobel Prize winners with non-Nobel Prize winners, and we can detect differences in the entropy level of those texts. The same we can do with music. We can apply this quantitatively in analyzing human organizations. There are some organizations which are more, have a higher functional performance, which have more complexity, less entropy in their system, more structural complexity than others, and it reflects in the capacity to produce work. So, what I want to propose, what we think occurs, is that synergy occurs in open systems that harvest energy and nega-entropy fluxes from the environment. That's why they are open, where diversity, cohesion, and synchrony and complementarity between the parts of the system constrain border conditions which increase the potential to produce work or increase free energy. The constraints of the border condition can be measured as information or as complexity. When these self-organizing systems reproduce, we have an autopoietic system, and which is equivalent to the constructural system which we heard this morning, how it's described. So life can be described thermodynamically as a synergistic open system which self-reproduces. Most of the ideas are in this book. You can read them there, and I hope to have a new version with better ideas. So most of this can be right now online. It's called The Roots of Synergy. It just shows with many examples how changes in free energy and reductions in entropy allows to define synergy in many, many different systems. So using measures of changes in entropy and changes of free energy can be used actually in practice to follow up systems and to measure the efficiency of how systems work. It can be used in practice and can be implemented in many cases. So I think at the end what we have is a law of thermodynamics. I mean, what I'm proposing is that the open systems can increase the production of work, the free energy, but only if they increase the non-redundant border constraints or information which manage the complexity of the system. That is, increases in free energy can be achieved only when somehow entropy is reduced. This is an empirical fact. There is no reason why that should be so. That's why it is a thermodynamic law. There is no basic theoretical argument for it. It's just in practice. And it's useful, it's of heuristic value, because if somebody discovers that this is not the case, we will advance science. We will learn why in some cases this doesn't occur, and we will understand nature much better. And on the other hand, that helps to clear the split between chemistry, thermodynamics, and biology by having a language which allows to define life as an open cell for reproducing multi-component synergistic systems, which is, of course, the old concept of autopoiesis by Maturana, but Maturana has a much more poetic language. He describes it much more beautiful than I do, but it's not operationally usable. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Klaus. This was perfect timing. We have 5 minutes for Q&A. Lib has the first question in the queue. Please, Lib, want to take it?
Hi, Klaus. How are you doing? Nice to see you at the conference.
How are you?
Just a question, knowing that you're supposedly the world's expert on ants, sociology, and thermodynamics. What is your? Do you have an opinion on the lazy ant study in respect to thermodynamics?
At what dynamics?
The lazy ant study from...
The lazy ant study, yeah, that's very interesting. I think it has to do with same with militaries. The armies, most of the armies in humans, they don't do much. They are dissipative structures, they just consume your resources. But there are certain moments of time where they're very useful. In ants like that. You have a colony where 30–40% of the colony doesn't do anything. It's the lazy ant. But in case of ant wars and in case of catastrophes, they are very, very useful. So it's a kind of reserve. It's thermodynamically understandable in a different time window. You have to understand that problem over years, not over months. So that's the case in all processes. No? It depends on the time window you use, and the conclusion you get is different. Yeah, agree with that?
So that's a good answer. What was the name of your book again? Your new book?
The Roots of Synergy. You have it free in archives, and you can pay for it. And earn me $1 if you buy it on Amazon Books.
Sure, I'll look into that. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Klaus? Okay, I have one. So, Klaus, you said that there are some measures or definitions of synergy that you prefer to other ones, and that has to do with its relation to complexity. I was wondering also, since we keep in the talks today so far going between animate versus inanimate, and what are the real borders when it comes to configuring or representing them in terms of thermodynamics. Does this affect in any ways the conception of synergy that you're considering when we move between animate and inanimate?
Well, I think it has to do with how we define the open system. In animate objects, they move. So if you want to, for example, now it's very popular to study politics in terms of open systems and how they polarize, but the systems, they have no clear borders. It's very difficult to define what a system is. So sometimes these concepts are not very useful. So we don't have to think that thermodynamics explains everything. But when you have the chance to define a system like a cell or an organism or an society, in some cases it's very easy, or a city, but not always it's easy. No? So I don't think it's good for everything, but it's good for many things.
I see. Okay, thank you. Did you want to add something, Klaus?
Well, I want to ask if anybody finds a reference about Adam Smith and synergy, please let me know. I haven't read all his 1,000 pages, and some of the books are not scanned. So maybe I'm missing it. So if somebody has that information, it would be very good. Very good.
Okay, so thank you very much, Ben. Oh, actually, we have another question. That's from Christian Ziegel. Christian, do you want to? Christian, should I just read your question or do you want to pose it?
Maybe turn your microphone on.
Hi.
Hello.
You know an example of a system that decreases its energy while maintaining its free energy unchanged?
Could you repeat that, please?
Do you know an example of a system that decreases its energy, its entropy while maintaining its free energy unchanged?
Interesting. I can't tell you. I wouldn't be surprised to find one. Because it's a continuous between one and the other. But I can't tell. It must be a fine equilibrium. But I don't